Welcome to Family Lifestyles. I'm Lynn Blankenship, the Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences Education in Metcalfe County, and today I have a special guest. I am joined by Mason Crawford, who is based out of the Hardin County Extension Office, and he is a coordinator and area ag agent for the Kentucky State University Cooperative Extension Service. Mason is a 2022 KSU Kentucky Association of State Extension Professionals Extension Associate of the Year. And he also, in 2022, was the integrated poster winner at the National 1890 Institution Conference. Congratulations, Mason. Thank you. He's a former agricultural education teacher and FFA advisor, and a former professional landscaper and sustainability consultant. And he's currently an agritourism operator in Hardin County. So Mason has a lot of knowledge to share with us today. And we are going to be talking about houseplant and plant propagation. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here today and to share some of the knowledge that I bring from those different occupations that I've held over the years. But one of my favorite things to do is to work with plants. I think they add so much vitality to a home or an office or any type of workplace. And I brought in some samples today that are easily propagated or reproduced asexually. So you don't have to save seeds and deal with the planting and the waiting. It's more of an immediate gratification type thing.
That's exciting. And you know, when people have houseplants, usually people who have houseplants are more than willing to share cuttings.
Absolutely. And there's so many things that are so easily to do with cuttings. We're going to look at some of the purple heart plants here today that are so easy to work with. And I realize they're not quite as purple. The viewers might be thinking, well, why are those purple hearts and the purple plants so green? And simply because these are intended to be outdoors. They're from a very temperate or almost tropical climate, originating in eastern Mexico. But in Kentucky winters, they just won't make it. So bring those in during the winter months and just try to keep them as healthy as you can. They still add some aesthetics to your home, but you can keep those plants going and then avoid having to buy the plants the next year to put into your outdoor landscapes.
Now these get more purple if you put your house plants outside over the summer. When they get in the sun, don't the leaves become more purple?
They're a very dark purple. And we'll try to put a picture of a healthy summertime one up on the screen for the viewers to see. It's just a matter of the lack of sunlight in an indoor environment, and just the shorter day lengths also can contribute to that.
And then they also bloom a little light lavender colored flower, right?
It is.
In the little intersection sort of
We do get those occasionally during the winter months, but it's not really ideal conditions. So again, we're just trying to keep them healthy, but occasionally you will get that bright pinkish lavender type flower, and that kind of brightens a day on a cold winter day to see one of those. And that's just one of the examples. Another one we're going to be looking at is the spider plant, and there's two different ways of propagating that we're going to take a look at. So that'll be some interesting fun for us. And then just separation is a third type that's actually the most common or easiest with a lot of the house plants. As long as they're not growing out of a central trunk or stem, then if they've outgrown their pots, a lot of times people just leave them that way. And then over time, they're left with a sick plant that can't expand its root system, when quite simply we could split it in half, add some fresh soil, or just put it into a bigger pot and continue to have a healthy plant for a long time. Yeah,
they need that soil, and when they use it all up, that's a good indication it's time to pot it up.
That's right.
I think of it
and share with your neighbors.
And share. Exactly. Okay, so let me just see. So what are some of the reasons, Mason, I know that houseplants have some benefits to the indoor environment.
Yeah, in addition to, well, the most common for us is just because it brings joy. We get to see that, but I think that it's just it creates a healthier environment, air quality in the home, and you know, it makes a more joyous atmosphere. It's so dreary a lot of times in the winter months, and we try to look outside as much as we can and go out on the days that we can, but there is no grass to go look at. The trees, most of the trees, unless they're evergreens, have lost all their foliage. So this is a chance to bring a little bit of the outdoors indoors.
Yeah, our winters tend to be long, brown, and muddy in Kentucky, so it is nice to have that greenery in the home. Is there anything that we need to think about with houseplants that might be toxic or poisonous to
Good
pets
point,
or
and there are
something?
certain species that are toxic. One that is you got to keep a close eye on is poinsettias because they're so popular during the Christmas holiday season. But once they have surpassed their ideal time, I actually kept one in my house for a year and a half last year, but there at the tail end, it started dropping leaves, and without being able to control the photo period, they don't really produce the vibrant red or white petals that make it so beneficial or to look at the leaves. So, but you do need to be aware. If they drop a leaf, or you have a dog or a cat that is just into pulling plants apart, make that one that's in the off-limits room, because you don't want to have any catastrophes with your animal.
Well, I also think of the poinsettias when the flower is very red, the colored leaves, those could be very attractive to a very young child even.
Absolutely.
And who might, try to put it in their mouth.
So keep those in mind, and of course poinsettia is just one example, so do your due diligence anytime you're bringing plants that you're not familiar with, that perhaps are not as common or you're not certain of, and do a little research, especially if you have small children or pets.
Okay, so what are some of the common ways that we can separate plants? Like if you have a friend that has told you she or he wanted some cuttings, how do we separate? How do we decide how to get those cuttings in the best way that it's going to offer success?
Okay, well there's a couple of tools that we can use. Just a simple pair of scissors is very common for stem cuttings. When we get into the separation where we're actually taking the root mass apart, then a serrated knife is good to use, or you can actually use a saw. I remember getting in trouble. You don't want to take your parents' really good wood cutting saw and start cutting through soil and rocks, because they're not too happy with you when they go to use it again. Same way, you don't want to use your favorite serrated kitchen knife and dull the blade. But if you have one that is set aside more for that purpose, then they work out well. So far as where to go, it just depends on what the plant is. One is simple as this purple heart. It's actually so tender that you can look down and just above one of the nodes, and a node, this is an internode section, and that's something to note when it's in the months that don't have a lot of sunlight, that internode length is going to elongate.
Okay.
And so
normally,
it'll from a lack of light. So you can just do a break if you want, or you can do a clean cut. And since the internode is a bit longer, you'll notice I removed a portion of it. If it is during the summer months, that is about the length that the internode would be to begin with. And one of the later segments, we're going to take a look at actually doing some guided practices with this and doing some of the stem cutting procedures. But just to get a little head start, we can go ahead and look, and on the spider plants, we can actually just remove the entire baby from the stem.
Oh, there you go.
And just for aesthetics, you can remove some of the leaves that are already a little brown. That can happen indoors, especially if you're using gas heat, where you have a really dry environment.
Or wood heat even.
Wood heat, gas heat. And then we'll show some other examples.
Little tiny roots already forming.
And this one has just been exposed to the air.
Some soil?
Yeah, that'll be on the next segment. So stay tuned. We'll be looking at that in just a minute.
Thank you very much, Mason. This is great. Thank you for joining us. Come back for the next segment. Learn more about how to share and propagate houseplants to improve your indoor home environment. Thanks.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be just like Cal Ripken. It's definitely humbling to know that now people are calling me a hero. Instead of finding the IED with my metal detector, the IED found me first, and that resulted in double above knee amputations. It's hard to describe the feeling of meeting somebody that you've always wanted to be like. There are people now that are looking up to you for their inspiration and to be their role model.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
Welcome back to Family Lifestyles, and we are back to learn more about houseplants and houseplant propagation with Mason Crawford.
Glad to be back. It's been just a short break.
Yeah. We got the table reset and we're ready to talk about some of the hands-on stuff, get our hands a little dirty here. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're going to do some plant propagation as we alluded to in the last segment, but we're actually going to go through and do some of those. In setting up for the second segment here, we actually came upon what?
The beautiful little flowers.
So this is
Yeah.
one of the little purple heart
heart.
flowers that we were mentioning, the lavender or pink type bloom.
They are
That's
lovely.
right here, and there's not too many on this time of year, but it is pleasant. Now you can imagine on a cold winter morning, just looking out, and that's the first thing you see is the beautiful little flowers.
Yeah,
So-
it's nice. Like if you're a Christmas cactus person and you like it when your cactus blooms in the winter, having one of these plants is also a little surprise sometimes with a nice flower.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is a simple visual way of doing the cuttings, because a lot of times we are immediately putting into soil.
Okay.
And well, we wonder what's going on. And we're going to pull out one that we've done a little while back
Okay.
in a moment. But first we'll talk about just doing some stem cuttings and actually just putting in water.
Okay.
So that's kind of a unique way. So we'll set this aside for just a second. And we're going to show some of the ones that we already have done. And this is some little of the purple heart or purple queen or even purple secretia. Those are three names that are used for this particular little plant. But if you look, I'm going to pull it out very gently so I don't mess up the roots on it. But this was taken just like the cutting that we showed earlier, where it was just a little broke off piece and put down in water. In a matter of about 3 weeks, it'll start putting out roots
Nice, healthy
that
roots.
are like that.
So how often do you have to change the water in those, Mason?
I do this from somewhat of a visual appraisal, but usually about 7 days, I'll
Okay.
do a water exchange
Once a week.
on that. And one of the future segments that we'll maybe talk about is some of the home type of fertilization that you can put in some of these if they're going to be on display for a longer period of time.
Okay.
But I think time is going to prevent us from going into too much of that depth. But
Okay.
this is one of those examples, and this is a small, you can buy these at some little gift shops and things like that. I think it's beautiful. I have it in my
is
office
lovely.
at work. So I just think it's something that adds a little aesthetics to the
It's a different
office.
way to display a house
Yeah.
plant. So I have a question though.
Sure.
How far up the stem of your cutting should you keep wet?
Okay, and it kind of depends on where the roots are. So for example, I'm going to pull out one. I was showing the different types of containers you can use, and a lot of times just by having these plants in the house, if the pets rub against them or you're vacuuming and they're down at the level, you've got to break them off or they break off on their own. And I'll just keep a glass of water and I'm constantly
Stick 'em in
sticking
there.
them down in there. And these were done, this is one that's very, very recent, only been done for probably 3 or 4
It
days.
hasn't started rooting
But
quite
then you've
yet.
got some of these that have been in there the
Oh, look at
same
those.
distance
Yeah,
as
have
those.
Good roots.
And so they're good for transplanting into whatever containers. Now, the longer the leaves that you, or the stems that you leave on them, the more kind of unique shape that they're going to get bending over
Right.
and things like that.
Trying to reach the light.
And asking about the depth, you have to adjust as the roots grow. Because as the roots grow, they're going to be pushing down on the bottom of the container. And so the water level will have to be a little higher. One thing I suggest is not putting leaves. So break off some of the lower leaves as you're putting it down in the water.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to do well if they're under submerged
They
in
just
water.
rot,
They
right?
just rot.
And then
And
that's
then
not
that'll
good.
contaminate your water and not very attractive any way you look at it. But once you get them rooted, or if you want to root directly in the water, there's just so many unique containers that you can use. Same way with the spider plants. They'll actually start putting some rudimentary roots out while they're
Air
still
roots.
growing.
I always think of them as air roots.
Yeah. But take a look at this little creation.
I like that.
So
So
it's
you've just taken some non-rooted pieces.
non-rooted pieces, and just take your scissors
Great way to reuse a glass bottle too.
and cut that. And you just have to
Stick
make
it
sure
in
that you
there.
have it just down at the source of the water.
Okay.
And then watch it over a period of days. And it won't be something that you see like tomorrow, but it's one of those very minuscule growth patterns, but over a period of 3 weeks,
You
you'll
see
start
those
having the
beautiful
roots like
little
this.
Roots come out. So this is a great activity to do with kids. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
Teaching them about how plants grow and roots, and they can watch those roots form. I know in preschool, when I was a preschool teacher, I always used to do the bean seed in the Ziploc bag and tape it to the window. And
Yeah.
and they loved watching that grow. So anything like this, kids learn
yeah.
a lot from doing these kinds of activities.
And antique jars. As you remember from the last segment we did last year, I like lots of rustic and vintage type things, and just old jars and vintage looking items. I think it just adds to it depends on the decor of your house, obviously, but it does help. And then something as simple as these little dessert cups can be used. And then you don't have to worry so much about the proper amount of water, because they're not going to sink down too low.
So that's perfect for a small little spider plant baby.
Absolutely.
Or up here you've got that teeny little aloe baby.
Oh yeah, that is one that I'm pretty excited about. I've never seen one quite this small before, but it's a cute little pot, and it's going to take this little baby a while to grow, but it's very unique. And then you can be also creative and find other things. Like this was a jar, a bottle rather.
Old Ale-8 bottle.
Yeah, that was found in the barn lot, and I guess a tractor had probably run over because it broke the top out.
So it was perfect for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a really neat thing to do.
Great
now, I'll
way
be
to
honest,
reuse.
that's a new cap on it. I don't know what kind of bottle that was.
Oh, you just popped it on there.
But I like L8 because it's a
Kentucky soda.
Kentucky soda. Now, one of the other things that you can do for containers, if you want to do a lot of cuttings, something as simple as an egg carton is good. And so, just for simplicity, I'll take my scissors and cut the top part off. You can do cuttings in both sides, but if you want little pods that are easy to transplant, something I like to do is keep these plants healthy and then make them into hanging baskets and other container pots for my patio and porches and things like that. But they don't always get the same level of care that they do in the home. So having an established root system that has a root ball with it makes for a more successful transfer. So we're actually going to shift out of the water rooting and get into some soil. So we can take our soil and just fill up our cartons.
So no drainage hole.
No drainage hole on this as long as you're not having it outdoors.
Okay.
And that it has to do with your level of watering. If you are one that you're not confident in the amount of watering that you're going to do, then you're going to want to poke a hole in the bottom of the but then you'll need to elevate it just a little bit to let the water out and put some kind of a pan under it so you don't end up watering the floor.
Absolutely.
So good point. And that is two approaches depending upon what your expertise level is at this point.
So basically, if you're not doing drainage, you're just giving it a teeny little bit of water, enough to keep that soil moist.
Just to keep it moist.
Yeah. You're not pouring a whole bunch of water on it, just a little bit.
And that's something that this soil is actually a little helpful in that, because it is a moisture control soil. So it has polyacrylamide gel inside the soil, which it helps it maintain moisture. So once you get it wet,
soaks up the water and holds it and releases it slowly over time.
That's correct.
All right. So that could actually be helpful for someone if some people tell me I have a black thumb and I can't keep plants living. And a lot of times after I talk to them for a few minutes, I find out it's because they are giving it too much care, over-watering.
Right. That can be a problem. So just to wrap this up, all you need to do is just put your plant down in the pod and pack the soil just a little bit. If you want to do spider plants, you can do the same thing. And then a matter of about a month to 6 weeks, you'll have a nice little plug that you could pull out and put in something else.
Transplant into a basket. Excellent. All right, so that was segment 2. Come back, join us for segment 3, because Mason has a lot more to share with us about houseplants and houseplant propagation. And we're back with Mason Crawford of K-State, and he is going to show us how to split plants now that need to be repotted. So
yeah. We're going to talk about a couple of different means of separation. And before we do that, though, we're going to jump in and finish up one last thing from the segment that we just completed. We were talking about different types of containers that you could use. So I just have a collection here. Anytime you find old antique bottles or vases, or even your nostalgic drinking glasses can make for nice additions. But you may wonder why we have vegetables on the table.
Well, I kind of think I know what you're going to say, but when you get your vegetables that sprout or you're using a top, maybe this is a good thing you can do with kids. So tell us about it.
Okay. Well, if you look over into this plant or this pot, you're actually going to see a carrot plant. And that was the top of this carrot a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And so actually just, if you imagine the Bugs Bunny carrot, the quintessential carrot that has just a little bit of greenery or a lot of greenery like this, but when I cut it, it just had just the little nub of the green. You can't just take a slice of a carrot and get it to work quite as well.
It has to have started sprouting a little bit.
Just a little bit of sprout, and then in about 3 weeks later, you're going to have that. Now, it looks like there's a lot of growth, but if you pull it up gently, I'm going to try to do that to show that just there's some very fine hair roots that are coming off of the main trunk of the stem. Now, I left a little bit more than what you necessarily have to, but I wanted to have a little success with it. I had a little bare spot in my container, and I thought, well, let's just put something in there that will help out with that. So I'll just leave that out where
So
it can be seen.
fun experiments. You know, it's a little sciencing with the kids. Instead of throwing that, into the recycle bin or the trash bin or your compost pile, see what happens.
Yeah,
It's
and the
fun to do
same
little
thing, if you've got an onion that has kind of gone bad, this one's a little soft on top, you can just cut the top off of the onion.
Oh, nice. So you leave the paper on it, just cut the top off and pop that down
just put
in
that
there.
down in the soil, and you're good to go.
Nice.
For example, we just plant it into, if you already have an existing pot, and it will start to grow another tuber like that.
So also, you can use like avocado seeds, and you put them in water. You can do pineapple tops, right?
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of things you can sprout like this. It's a good thing to do with kids too.
I think so. It's just, and it's something to do on those snow days, whenever, or just over the winter break. It's a good chance to do those things. Same way, if you've got a potato that's just got a little bit of sprouting going on, you can do the same thing. You don't even have to sacrifice the whole potato. You can still use that one for dinner.
Just cut the sprout off.
And just cut the little sprout, and you just bury that down in the soil, and you're going to have a potato plant.
Fun.
Which the foliage on these plants is actually very attractive, especially if you're just a little different like I am.
Sweet potato plants in particular are very pretty.
Absolutely. Very beautiful.
They're often used in landscaping and yeah.
So that'll be cool. Now, the one that we're going to look at today is taking a look at the fern. And this is one of the patio type ferns.
Yes.
A lot of people were going to have these in their, bring them in, have them on their patios. But then when it gets to be that first cold snap, they forget about them and they go out and the whole thing is brown.
Yeah.
And they just throw them away. Yeah. Well, last year, actually I guess year before last, I actually looked and my mother had thrown hers away in the trash can, and I pulled it out. I'm
so that's this one?
No, it was a predecessor to this one. Yeah. But this year, so she gave it to me.
Okay.
Now, what you're going to notice though, if you're bringing them in from outdoors, you're going to have pots that purposely have drainage holes in the bottom.
Yes.
And that's essential if you have them outdoors because you're overwatering if nothing else. But when you bring them into your home, you want to be careful because you don't want to damage hardwood floors or anything like that. So if you'll notice when I pull this out, it's actually lined in plastic, and the pot has drainage holes, but where the plant is, I'm not getting water that's all over the place.
And I like that you've reused a dog food bag. Those bags are super tough.
Yeah.
And that's a great reuse for those. If you have dogs, you go through, one every couple of weeks, and this is a great way to reuse those bags.
So that's a good observation, and it's just, you can use other things. You could even have another container that's inside that's smaller, that doesn't have drain holes, or you can just improvise and reuse something. But we're going to set that back out of the way, and what we're actually going to do is, if I can find my knife, here it is.
So this fern is so big that, this was obviously a patio planter, but you could turn this into 2 hanging baskets for next
easily.
year. Easily, or maybe even 4.
And that's, a lot of times we'll cut them into 4s.
Okay.
So we'll do that today. But you just start usually down at the bottom, but it's really hard, so we're going to have to just hack our way through.
So the reason why it's hard is because the roots kind of grow around and around and around and around,
They
sort of
do.
like that. And so what he's cutting through, it looks like just a chunk of dirt on the bottom, but really he's cutting through all these thick roots. These ferns grow super, super fast. And so you really do need kind of almost like a saw or a serrated knife to kind of get through and
This is one of those knockoff Ginsu knives.
Yeah, that's perfect for that.
And it works.
That's the one they say you can cut a can and it doesn't make it get dull, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we're going to flip it over, and we're going to try to match up so we get straight across.
So he has now divided it pretty equally into 4 separate chunks. You definitely want to put down, like this isn't something you want to do on your kitchen table. Like do this out, maybe outside, cover your deck. If you have a table on a deck or a table outdoors, cover it with something and then do it outdoors. Because if you're going to do it inside, cover the floor as well. Because it is.
And we have done that here.
Yeah, we have. The floor is covered. But these ferns, even if you take very good care of them, they have the tiny little brown leaves that just fall off when you're doing this. And it's going to make a mess, but it's worth it. Because you're going to save yourself about $60 if you're making 4 baskets out of this.
Right, and now
more.
just because of the essence of time, we're only going to split this into 2, but you can imagine cutting it halfways again and being able to get 4. And they make for a good hanging basket that is a collage of different plants.
Oh, there you go.
So you could do some of the purple heart, some spider
So
plant.
just fill in around the
patio
edges
fern.
once you pop that in and with some other things that you have, and you're going to have a beautiful hanging basket.
Or if you just want to make another patio fern, you could turn, this one will be just as nice, be just as large as this in about a few months.
And probably better than what you would buy at the store.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
in
you
better
would be.
shape.
Yep.
So that's okay. So then we have another plant here, which is a common plant. A lot of people have these. This is a peace lily. It's very big and heavy.
And it is the same procedure. We can look at lay it over. I'll get the ferns out of the way.
Here. I'll pull out the,
Okay.
there we go.
Now this one's a little wetter. It's in a pot that has a built-in drain on the bottom, so we just so it's kind of got a reservoir of water underneath.
And then Mason has actually thrown a couple of rocks in there. When you pot into a pot like that, you want to put some rocks over the holes so that the soil does not block the drainage holes.
Correct.
So these are the rocks that he had in the bottom.
And it's a very similar process. In the essence of time, I don't think we'll have time to do the complete split, but you're just going to saw through. And these plants, you're going to see, have a lot of different nodules.
They're sectioned, sort of.
They're almost, well, this one almost,
Or you
this
just
one will
pull it
break
apart.
but without even using the saw.
Because it was nice and wet.
So you can make another pot with that one.
Or you could even make multiple
Many,
pots. Yeah.
right.
So
Just bear in mind, the more tearing apart that you do, the more fibrous roots that you're going to damage. So you just got to be careful about that.
yeah, and it'll take it a little while once you get it back into the pot and pot it. It'll kind of wilt a little bit for a little while, and then it'll boop, spring back up and be
So don't
super
fret
happy.
if it's a little wilted for the first couple of weeks
Transplant
afterwards.
shock, it's called, I believe, right?
Absolutely, it is.
Okay, so we learned a lot today from Mason about houseplant care and propagation. Thank you so much for sharing
You're welcome.
your knowledge
Thank you
with
for
us
having me.
today. And hey, if you have any questions about houseplant care, contact your local county cooperative extension service office.